So please welcome Nicole and the opening panel.
Thank you. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. So as he just said, data science has improved dramatically. We have new tools available to us to help us maximize the strategies that we're all doing with first, second, and third-party data. In order to make sure that we're being savvy, we also need to be strategic with our collection and make sure that how we're interacting with the consumers is considered. So it's easy to make a customer match list, but the difficult part is what we do with it. So kicking off to ladies first with Pooja, what is pre-search to you?
Well, pre-search really, it's really all about the data. And I think that's the number one thing that's made us successful. It's looking at the data, not just from search, but also taking your other channels. So looking at your programmatic data, looking at your data that's coming in from your SEO, and actually combining that so you're looking at it from all different channels. And that helps us to actually really get fine-tuned and targeted and knowing who our audience is, and then we're targeting them the right way and creating the right segments. So that's been really what pre-search is for us. And also to add to that, really building your personas. I think why we've had a lot of success is we know who our audience is because we've gone in and we've done those insights on them. We've done the data research on them. And that's really what it's all about.
Awesome. Michael?
Well, thank you. When I think about pre-search, I agree. It definitely is about data and leveraging custom audiences to provide our customers with a personalized experience. And we use it to drive efficiency and value. We look at it from a targeting basis about talking to the customer at the right time when they are actually in the mindset of looking to plan a trip to Las Vegas. And then also a big part for us is it's about efficiency. We compete directly with large OTAs like Expedia Group and Priceline Group, and so they have massive budgets, multi-billion-dollar budgets. And so, for us to effectively compete, we want to talk to our customers in the right place at the right time because we just can't go head-to-head on a spending basis.
John?
So when I think about pre-search, it's really the concept of you probably aren't appropriate to see my ad and I don't want to pay for you. So when we think about pre-search from an audience standpoint, what we do is analysis of saying this is the demographic I want to come in at the bottom of the funnel, the highest likelihood, this is their normal behavior, this is the user experience they prefer most, and we customize our audiences with our ad and our landing page for each experience by level of the funnel. So we'll have the least amount of the most generic, broadest audience target set at the top of our funnel to feed everything down and get them into our cycle, see if we can pick up some new customers into our lists. And then what we do is we break out each level of the sales funnel or the purchase cycle by the likelihood that you are going to convert for us, and then we bid out our keywords on that to make it most efficient, but also to reassess our data and bring the people to the most appropriate spot when they come in.
Thank you. So even the novice intern can set up a customer file and build lookalike audiences. So tell us a little bit about the rigor and the formality we might want to consider if we have not yet outlined a holistic cross-channel audience go-to-market strategy. John?
I'm sorry. So the rigor is, the best way to put it is that when we first launch any initiative, it will be the worst week of my employees' lives. That is the nice way of putting it. 99% of the time, we have access to data in advance from the site. We have the CRM system. We understand the user behavior. And what we start doing is we start slicing data. We break down, we look for Joe Schmo, who is 25 to 35 out of Mission City, Texas, who shows this type of stuff, who is a technophile, enjoys eating out regularly, and typically spends at least 35 seconds on the registration page before proceeding. And what we do is we say, all right, we're going to start building lists of individuals. And what we do is we get down to as nitty-gritty detail as possible, and we start out and see how big our lists are. If the list, after we've done 4 or 5 layers of targeting or behavior analysis, is less than 10,000 people, then we start pulling out some of the layers and really start doing it. We want to be refined, we want to be finite, we want to predict your exact move before you come into it, and my team will just pour over spreadsheets about this left and right, providing it makes enough sense from a volume standpoint. Because then we also run into the same scenario of, all right, I just paid 45 hours of overtime over 2 weeks for my employees to get an audience segmentation that is too small to actually utilize.
Thank you. Michael.
Yes, when I kind of think about the rigor, thankfully we've got a large enterprise media tech and marketing tech solution with Adobe. And so really for us, data centralization, we leverage a DMP, which really helps orchestrate initiatives cross-channel. It's definitely a large enterprise approach, which may not be fully applicable or the best use for all advertisers, but for a large enterprise like MGM, it definitely works. And I think when, as we're working through some of those projects, as you were mentioning, John, I think one of the things for me that helps me is, understanding and being able to effectively communicate data and segmentation, right? Trying to explain to my boss what a trait is, what a segment is, what sources of data we are pulling from. Hey, if somebody actually converted on the site, that we're going to take that that prop and make it into a trait, which then will feed a segment. So really being able to effectively communicate the segmentation and simplify it so that the enterprise understands what we're doing. But for us, it's the DMP that really helps us, and the rigor that we've put into that framework.
Sorry. For us, really, the rigor is all about making sure that we're looking at this as an omni-channel approach. So how are we connecting from the offline to the digital, making sure that we're looking at taking our data that we're getting from our search and pushing it into programmatic and also into social. And I think that's been one of the biggest successes we've had because we're actually looking at it as a holistic approach. And I recommend that to everybody. If you're not looking at it as an omni-channel approach, it's not going to be as successful. And that's why, because we do the omni-channel approach, we're able to go and get more insights on that customer that allow us to build the right segments. And we're building that through knowing their details.
So what has been some of the most useful second and third party sources that you've seen this past year?
So for us, we're just starting to dabble into the Google in-market audiences. And in the early days, we've seen a lot of success. When it comes to third party, I don't use it. I'm probably one of the main segments in Canada who started not using third party. It's just expensive and it doesn't really work for us. But we're using a lot of our DS360 and creating those custom segments similar to the way we do programmatic. So in the past, we were building search segments separately. Now we're looking at it, really looking at what the audience wants and building for the audience first, and then building out their segments and actually having a personalized approach to it.
John?
I'll be honest, we don't do a lot of the third party. Price is often a restriction. My favorite though, first party, our CRM data, because what we do is remember the old books where you pick your own path, if you check this, you go that? We have a lot of scenarios where we're able to kind of judge the behavior and start the analysis from that, because you have to check off XYZ characteristics. We'll ask inane, pointless questions to the consumer's eyes of, how much do you make? Do you like to go work out and stuff like that? And it just helps us build that. Secondarily, we've been trying out the Bing audiences for the LinkedIn data that's being pulled into it. We're big on the Google in-market audiences. My favorite, I don't know if you consider it first or second party, is just building audience segmentation and lookalike out of Google Analytics and doing an import in.
Michael?
Yeah, we've been working on some interesting tests. This is probably more of a first-party data segment, but we've actually been looking at a cross-channel initiative called our High-Value Guest Initiative, where Adobe has been kind of helping us tie together a lot of different consumer signals. We pull Adobe Analytics segments and are kind of doing a similar thing with that with our DMP. So that's been a great way to tie multiple channels together. But you were asking about second party. So I've been working through a second party data test with actually Amex. So that's actually been really interesting. I mean, I really think because, as noted, third party data is really expensive. And not on the search side, but on the programmatic side, we buy a ton of it. So any second party data, you always get a really unique and fresh perspective. And it's obviously much, the cost is much less. We've been testing a little bit of the Google in-market audiences, but we haven't, we're a little early into it, but I think they're really interesting, and I think, it's just a great way to help us, connect with those customers.
Probably add one more point to it. Another thing that we've just recently done, it took a lot of work to get there, is where we floodlighted all of our pages. And that's allowing us to get real first-party audiences that we know they have interest because they've hit our pages already. It took about a year and a half to get there, but after we've gone through the pain and the rigor of it, it's actually been really successful. So that's another thing that I would recommend looking at if you haven't looked at floodlighting your pages.
So you already answered, Pooja, that you're not using third-party data. John, do you have any?
Not really.
No?
Not that I would talk about.
Yep. And?
Yep, no, not for search.
All right, so there you have it. All of our panelists have not incorporated, at least on record, third-party data. So if anyone in the audience is doing that and feels like it's been good for your company, please bring that up over cocktails later. Okay, so maybe in the next couple years we will see more testing here, expanding reach, at least for this sample size of SIS. All right, shifting gears a little bit. Our natural conversation on the phone and prepping was, we all ended up going into the silo discussion. We also heard that in the prior panel. So it's a key challenge. So when building first-party behavioral segments, you're going to run into your other teams. And you have to figure out what the downstream impact of not being able to leverage all of the different teams, their challenges. You have to prioritize who's maybe first to the table to target a consumer and really kind of fight for your sandbox. So with that in mind, it can be challenging conversation internally, and that can be some of the hardest parts of our job. So with that, tell us a little bit about your experiences in overcoming those challenges.
Sure.
Pooja.
So for us, I think the biggest thing to overcome silos is we all sit together. If we don't sit together, we're a quick WebEx call away. So we're constantly talking to our teams. And we're in the weeds actually sharing the details of what we're learning on a weekly basis. So on a weekly basis, I hold a weekly call that we actually share all the insights with not only our digital team, but we're sharing it with the content team, we're sharing it with the sales team, and we're sharing it literally with anybody on the business who wants to learn. So they come in weekly and we share optimizations that we're making, what's working, what's not, the most successful keywords, because then that gets shared with both the programmatic team and the social team, and also with our internal web team to go and start making sure they're leveraging those things. So that's been one of the biggest things to get out of the silos. And when we start a campaign, we're really all coming to the table and working together. So when I referred to the omni-channel approach before, that's huge for us. If one person's not included, it doesn't work. So again, getting the teams together, working together, dream team, that's how it works.
Yes, you know, we actually went through an interesting change in MGM around 2016. Prior to 2016, our campaigns used to be very fragmented. Bellagio would control their own budget. MGM would have their own budget. They'd almost essentially compete with each other. We had, I think, half a dozen media agencies, half a dozen creative agencies. So really for us, when you talk about silos back in, you know, pre-2016, it was very siloed. So we actually made a pretty bold move and consolidated all of the media teams. So into one centralized organization with one media agency of record and one creative agency of record to really ensure that, right? Hey, let's get everybody on the same team. Let's align all of the goals towards enterprise goals, towards, you know, driving EBITDA for the enterprise. You know, so I really think that really helped us. I mean, helped us look at the way we invest our dollars as well as the way we evaluate the results. You know, and then yes, obviously, kind of as Pooja had mentioned, I think it's just, you know, yes, sitting together, having kind of that open line of communication. You know, I always just get up and go and talk to my teams, right? And I tell people, hey, don't send an email, right? So thankfully, we have the framework and we have the budget direction and the guidance and that decision making set up. And so now it's just really about, you know, collaborating together, and it really helps us a lot to really just pivot and do things quickly.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point, the collaboration part. Even if you sit on a global team, get talking to your global counterparts, because the amount of points that you could share with each other and learn from each other, it's amazing. So that's definitely on a global scale to try that.
John?
So I come at it from a different angle. So I'm the agency. My big issue is when the clients have silos within their own operation. Let's be honest, some departments operate completely siloed. They don't know what one hand is doing for the other. They have their own independent bonuses that they have to try and achieve and focus on is what do I need to do to get that? And more often than not, we don't see them talk to one another. So we've come at it at a different angle from the agency side, because God knows I work the majority of the side with the digital client, but I need to know what's going on with the rest of the company. And it sounds weird, but I have to operate like that. All right, I'm the kid, my parents are divorced, and I'm trying to get them to reconcile, and I'm going in and begging them to talk to one another. And we do it one of two ways. We ask our digital client to give us direct access to the traditional client or the other media teams, and we'll start poking and prodding them. Or we start asking them, like, is there TV in market? Is Pandora going? Is there print going in XYZ? And when they tell me they don't know, I'm saying, can you please go to that person and start asking that question? And we more or less forcibly make a lot of clients talk to their own coworkers. Sometimes they didn't even know they existed. We've run into that quite awkwardly a couple times now. But it helps start the conversation, because what our big thing is, if you're going to tout the word holistic media, fancy, omni-channel, et cetera, it doesn't really exist unless you actually talk to your colleagues. And the reality is you don't want to have to come down to me forcing you to do that, because it's going to get really awkward and inappropriate as we progress. So we stress, talk to your cohorts. Please don't make your agency do it, because if we do, we're going to ask some very sensitive questions in not the most appropriate way and piss a lot of people off. But it'll also break down the silos. So take it as you will.
Going off script a little bit, do you ever find yourself in the situation where you're working with another agency and trying to?
Yep. So I have one client. So years ago when I worked for a large holding company, we had a pharma company that had awarded the business to 9 agencies to collaboratively work together. Yeah. And part of the contract mandate, I don't know who sold this in, was at least 4 of the agencies have to sit together. So we actually had to open up desks in our office to have them come work as an externship together. That was one of the nicer ways to do it. Usually the rest of the time is I have them on speed dial and basically a Skype and saying, hey, you and I are talking today, XYZ. We try and keep the other agencies in tune as much as possible. This is agency life, let's be honest. We're here to work together, but we're also here to take each other's business and knock each other out. So we try and keep that open line of communication, but we also have to do it with a certain filter, if you will, to not give up too much, to protect ourselves, but also work in the client's best interest.
Do you have any? Okay. Awesome. So as it relates to building first-party data segments, tell us a little bit about your latest wins and/or considerations in building out that custom segmentation.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and kick us off. Like I was mentioning, we really, I think a great win was just our recent cross-channel partnership where we actually leveraged analytics segments, working across search, social, and display to effectively identify very high-value guests who have a high propensity to visit, and send them tailored promotional messages across different channels. So I think that was it's a great win. We're still in the evaluation stages of the results, but it's really being able to execute on data and campaigns at that kind of scale across channel was a great win for us. And kind of when I think about some of our, challenges or, areas within first-party data that I look at is, the benefits of centralizing via like a data management platform versus the ease of, like you said, any intern can upload from custom audiences. So, I think as you look at the rigor and, how you want to monetize your first-party data, you got to kind of figure out, what's easy and quick to do now versus can I set myself up with a framework to do large cross-channel initiatives later.
So one of our key wins was, I alluded to this earlier, was adding the floodlights so to actually get the first-party audience data. Another win we have, which we've just recently completed, was going and tagging all our content, all our ads. Basically anything and everything that touched an audience was tagged. It took us about 1.5 years, and I could say 115 different versions, so it was very painful and tedious, a lot of late nights. But having everything tagged now makes it so much easier for us to go and create those custom segments and make sure that we're targeting the right audience, because we have those learnings and those data insights right in a single platform. So we particularly use Domo, and we could go in and create multiple templates, multiple segmentations to really know who we're targeting. And that was a huge win for us, because before we had naming conventions that were completely different across the globe. Now globally, every single content piece, every single website, every single ad that's out there is named the exact same way. And that's been a huge benefit for us.
Nice. John?
So one of my favorite ones that we did is probably about 1 year or so ago. We were working with an online travel agency, an OTA, and we were doing an analysis of historical data of what people visited the site to book versus what they actually booked. Then we overlaid it by their geography and their primary home airport and their household income. And what we were discovering is if you had a household income in the bottom 60%, and you were living, for example, in Atlanta and you're searching on Jamaica, you were more likely to go and book Puerto Rico. It was more cost efficient at the scenario. So what we would start doing is taking that data and building site links along the ads. When you search for this and you have this demographic and this outline, you'll be served these site links, but then you're going to be retargeted with the destination you're more likely to book on to help rechange that. And we saw a hefty little jump in our conversion rate for all of these segments as a whole.
That's great. All right, so what's the future of search with AI, with moving more upper funnel? Even before we think it, the precog, it's more a little bit like Minority Report. So what's your thoughts, Michael?
You know, when I think about the future of search, and automation's already here, but I think it's just continuing that path of automation, right? Letting us focus more on strategy, data, segmentation, audiences, right? It will be less about selecting the individual keywords. I think voice is a great area and a great growth area. Travel has some interesting examples of voice. I think some of the integrations are very difficult, which definitely limits the practicality. I would say you're probably going to see more of them come from the OTAs first, just because, for a brand, it's very, it's a lot of technology to work on. And like Kayak has some great booking assistants that use voice, where you can actually use kind of an Alexa voice assistant. And I think with the amount of money that some of these OTA groups spend on tech, I was just at a conference last week where the Expedia group spent about $1.5 billion on tech. So I'm like, with that kind of spend, I think they're gonna probably leverage that technology first. I still don't know when Google's gonna really kind of monetize that whole thing, but I'm sure it's coming. And then really it is, ensuring that you're effectively orchestrating all your data, because there's just so much data out there, but you don't want to cannibalize yourself or just rob from another channel. So just that being more precise and putting that rigor in place.
John?
So I have two different thoughts, but they pretty much tie together. I believe the concept of the keyword is going to be gone within 4 or 5 years. We are so hyper-focused on our audience and our demographic data, our first, second, third-party data, and who we show an ad to. No one really cares about the keyword. Between how the search engines have changed out the match types to a point where who just really cares, or it's going to be exact-ish or close enough style of search keyword, let's start focusing on the audience and the ad and make sure we've taken that audience and lined it with the ad more so. So think of it more like a Yelp scenario or like the local service ads. There's no keyword base to it. It's just a categorization and an ad that's been pre-built with an audience.
It's funny you say that, because that's exactly where we're going as well. The keyword, I don't think it's going to last much longer. We've already started changing gears, and we're really looking at what that audience is interested in, pushing more stuff and creating segments based on the audience, similar to programmatic. I think I alluded to that too earlier, where search is definitely following in the same format. So I completely agree. Keywords, I don't know how long they're going to be here for.
All right, well, please find us later with your questions. We look forward to continuing that debate. Or do we have time for Q&A?
Yeah, we have some time for Q&A. Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, panel. I guess a question I have, and I'm not sure if it can be broadly applied to kind of everyone, because it might be different for everyone, right? But when it comes to kind of making these actionable decisions that you have to make in order to execute and pivot sometimes, how do you know what data to use and like what to kind of not use? Is that down to experience? Is it down to communication? Like, what is it? Is there anything that broadly applies there for you?
I think it's a blend of experience and performance, right? When you look at data, I think you have to make the best educated decision. Does this align with my target consumer, my target demographic? And then ultimately, you got to spend some money and test, right? I think thankfully within the search realm, it's probably one of the easier areas to test, right? Our conversion rates are very high, our interaction rates are very high. So, I think it's, just sifting through the opportunities, seeing if it aligns with your business objective, and then just ultimately putting some chips on the table and testing it.
Yeah, and how is testing kind of evolving as we head into 2019 for you, and how is your testing evolving, you guys?
I think it's just being in those weeds, looking at your numbers, and not being afraid to try things. You need to be cutting edge, and if you don't pilot things and test things out, you're really not going to grow and learn what actually works for your business. So I think with us, we're constantly, I'm referred to at Cisco as the pilot queen because I'm always asking to do a pilot. So test things out, and it'll only evolve as stronger as the test that you build out.
Okay. Any other folks for any other questions for these folks? Oh, Lori always has a question. Here you go, Lori.
I'm just wondering, who's leading the death of the keyword? Is it the platforms? Are the brands leading it because of the way that they're putting the data together now? How is that?
I think it's the platforms. I think we're getting to a point now. I mean, if you look at Yelp, it's not a keyword target, it's a category base, and that's been a successful model for them. But we've been provided with so many tools and so many concepts, dynamic search ads, responsive search ads, which are just crawling sites. There's no reason for me to even bother with the keyword. The Google Shopping and PLA model already existed to that degree. So I believe the platforms have given us the runway to do this. It's just now us actually saying, oh yeah, now we don't need to do this anymore.
I have one more question. With Google Lens coming out on the iOS, do you think that possibly that might sort of work as a keyword in the future? I mean, that would show the most intent if they were taking a picture of a piece of clothing or object.
I mean, from a monetization standpoint, from Google's angle, that's going to be the same concept of the category. It's not a keyword base. It's using their voodoo witchcraft to understand what the picture is and then recategorize it to something else within their algorithm.
Hey guys, this is Mark Ortiz. I'm with American Honda. I got a question for you. You're talking about the death of the keyword, but what about, and I don't want to be too over dramatic, but what about death of the click? And what I mean by that is that, you know, Google for so long has been an information provider, and now what we're seeing is Google's actually become an information broker, right? So you go to the SERP, and I'll give you a perfect example. Look for an airline flight and price. They'll actually surface that information on the SERP, which in many cases, people won't go to the actual website. They'll make their decision based on that. So what do you think about that? And we see that on the automotive side. So for example, somebody's looking for horsepower or a dealer or specifications. Google will surface that information, and they won't even go to the brand site to get that information. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, and this has been a model that I've seen as long as I've been in this industry, Google does nothing for anyone if it doesn't benefit them first. So the concept of the death of the click is very realistic because it's a goal of ultimately just having you never leave the Google property, the Google platform.
Yeah, we're seeing it.
Yeah, so that's the reality of it is, the question is, have they changed their billing model or their cost model to adjust for that? And if not, when are they going to do it? Because you're right, the click is going to be gone. We don't look at the last click conversion anymore. We're very heavy up on the view through. I don't get charged for these things for the most part. It's all about the click, or it's all about the multi-touch engagement. If we can all live on a single engine platform, then there'll be no reason for the click. So just as you're saying, the knowledge graph is a living nightmare for me. Whenever there's a news article, things that come out, my ads are gone. There's no more reason for the click. It's the matter of how long can they keep you on the Google platform or the Bing platform ultimately. So what you're saying is very likely true and probably coming in simultaneously with our belief of the death of the keyword.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree. Also, I recommend we have to change the way we're thinking. So there was the clicks. We used to look heavily at the clicks. Now starting to look at other areas and other optimizations. So for me, I'm looking at repeat visits. That's my #1 metric that I'm looking at. How can I bring those people back to the page continuously so I could start putting them down our funnel? So that's just another way to look at it.
Does everyone in the audience kind of agree with this whole concept of the death of the keyword? You can just nod.
Let's rename it, death of the keyword.
Death of the keyword. I mean, you know, it's happening, I guess. All right, so Nicole, panel, we're out of time, but thank you